Welcome to the ChadBurn Show, brought to you by M. Chad Baldwin. Welcome to the ChadBurn Show. I am your host, M. ChadBurn. And unfortunately, because we're still recording from home, as you can tell from behind me, Julien Renvozé is not with us, but I know he is with us here in spirit and will give us his normal little whoop of support for the show. We will hopefully be recording back with him once all this COVID stuff is done. But until then, we're doing it from the ChadBurn headquarters, my house. This week, for episode 33, we are going to have ourselves a special debate episode, bringing on two guests that have been on our show before, taking on the perspective of both an Eagles fan and a Giants fan to talk the NFL draft. As many of you know, on my recent posts and the recent episodes, I am not a fan of the Eagles draft. I have been pretty hard on their second-round draft pick of Jalen Hurts. I think it's a poor decision. I'm getting tired of people telling me he's a winner, and that's the reason why I should take him. I do not believe in Doug Peterson's strategy around it, but so you don't have to keep hearing me bitch and moan about it, I figured I'd bring on some other people to add some color to it and some different thoughts on why it may be a good pick as well as why it's probably a terrible pick. So without further ado, I want to introduce Carlo Makarechi, our resident Philadelphian. Hello, Carlo. How you doing?
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me back.
Dude, my pleasure. And all the way from New York, we have a residential New Yorker in-house analyst for New York sports, Dillon Fields. Dillon, awesome having you back on.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
All right, guys. So, as I said before, this is going to be a little debate format. Each of you are going to have some time for your opening remarks as well as my thoughts on the topics as well. And then we are going to obviously have a little back and forth banter. But I want everyone to just be civil and no one to hurt each other's feelings. No one go for low blows. Understood, Dillon? Don't make fun of Eagles fans here too much, all right? All right, but anyways, before we get started that, I just want to check in with you guys health-wise. Carlo, Dillon, Carlo, with you first. How is everything with COVID-19 still standing still strong? Everything good?
Yeah, everything is great. This was week 7 for me of working from home, week 3 working from my childhood home. So adapting to my new surroundings. It's been a lot more comfortable here than in my 600 square foot apartment in Washington. But good to be with family. Everyone's healthy and just kind of adapting.
Oh, that's good to hear, man. Dillon, yourself, how's it going?
I guess ditto. It's been tough. I'm being more mentally tested than physically. It's just tough to be in quarantine for so long. But hopefully within the next few months things start to open up a little bit and case numbers start coming down. But you got to just listen to the experts.
That is the hope. That is the hope that as soon as this is gone and we'll have sports back. I know you guys all have you been keeping up? What have you been doing to fill the sports gap? I know for me it's been Last Dance of Korean baseball. I said I'd bring that up, but how have you guys been dealing with that with no sports? I guess we'll go Dillon this time and then back to Carl.
No Korean baseball for me. I love baseball in a lot of ways, but watching it sometimes, even as a big fan, can get a little bit tiresome. So as a big Yankee fan, I can sit through maybe like 7 innings of a regular season game, but Korean baseball, I don't know. I don't know if that is past the threshold.
Dude, the LG Twins, the Samsung Titans, come on, man. These are top teams. Carlo, how you doing with it, man?
Aren't the games at like 2 a.m, Chad? Are you up?
Well, no. So, all right, I will.
Baseball?
Yeah, there's an asterisk definitely on that. I'm not watching it live, but it is something.
You're watching replays of Korean baseball.
It's kind of like a nice basketball. A background thing, dude. Honestly, come on. What else do I have that's new and recent? I went through Eagles games. Now I have to get at least something that's happening now. It's brutal.
I think video games, if you're really desperate.
Oh, video games. Yeah, Madden has been a big one. I got Madden 20. That's been going strong. But yeah, I don't play FIFA anymore. I got too beat up by you guys just to keep playing that. So no more of that shit. All right. Well then, so let's get right into it because I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. For those of you listening in, Dillon, Carlo, and I have some group chats where we keep up to date with everything, talking sports, and it's been fire this week. So I expect that same intensity, the kind of anger that was in a lot of those debates we had on chatting, will also translate to this episode. So I'm going to pull up my little notes here of what we're going to be going over. So we're going to hit off with question 1 for the show in episode 33 of the ChadBurn Show. We're going to be looking at the draft, okay? So obviously, so far, besides watching The Last Dance and, for me, Korean baseball, the biggest sporting event so far has been the NFL draft. It was pretty amazing, I got to say. Some headlines came out of that were shocking, I think, for a lot of teams, including the backup quarterback for Aaron Rodgers. But I want to say, before we dive into the Eagles picks as well as the Giants picks for Dillon, what were your thoughts of the virtual draft? How do you think it was executed? And after all the dust had settled, everything was done, who do you think were the big winners? I'm going to start with you, Dillon.
So I thought the NFL draft went really well. Just from a logistical standpoint, it seemed like there might be a lot of issues having to kind of like turn a dime and all of a sudden plan so short in advance to have everything be done virtually. And obviously, you know, when this stuff is all planned hastily, you have potential technical difficulties. And we had heard rumors just days before the draft when they had done like a mock run through, and it was not going well. And I think that the NFL really did a great job of having a smooth, seamless draft that was actually quite enjoyable. You know, it's always fun to see the players come up on the stage and to, you know, hug the commissioner and realize their big moment. And, you know, it's obviously a lifelong dream for these guys. So that's always fun. And it was upsetting to not be able to see that. But all things considered, the draft went as well as it could have. There were no real snags in the first round. Things kind of were more concise and efficient almost in some ways because everything was online. So I thought it was a great job. The NFL did a good job, and Roger Goodell came off really well. So I was impressed with the NFL, and for that reason, they were really, the NFL as a whole was a winner for executing this and actually having it on time and not pushing it back. So I think it actually worked out really well for a sports-deprived NFL community. But the second winner, an actual NFL team, and I know this is probably tough for all of us to swallow, but the Dallas Cowboys, I think, had an incredible draft. And, you know, it's hard to really delve into later round picks and say, oh, they won because this 6th rounder, because it's hard to say. We're not, you know, you can evaluate some tape, but it really is hard to say, you know, for these unknown commodities, what's going to happen down the line. Those later round picks will determine if you had a winning or a losing draft. But the early round guys who are the sure things, how you navigate that first round is how I at least view the winners immediately after the draft.
Right.
I think that partially out of luck, the Cowboys had CeeDee Lamb fall to them, and being able to take a great value there, but also take that player away from the Eagles, who, if you ask me, the Eagles should have traded up to grab CeeDee Lamb, because even if it would have cost you a high draft capital, the fact that the Cowboys got them is really demoralizing. And it's also, it would have been a huge lift for the fan base and for Carson Wentz and just for Eagles Nation as a whole to have that kind of, you know, infusion of talent at the wide receiver position, which has been such a struggling position for the Eagles for the last few years. So I think that was a missed opportunity. And for the Cowboys, they took advantage of what kind of fell into their lap. And so for that reason, I think they won the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I won't argue with that. I would say from a draft perspective, I really did enjoy that Roger Goodell was getting booed still. That was fun. I'm glad they bring that. And we got to do little MTV Cribs and check out where all the coaches' digs were, with the big winners being Sean McVay and Cliff Kingsbury, who live in the sickest pads I think any coach could live in. But without diving further into, you know, where the magic happens in MTV Cribs, Carlo, what were your thoughts in the draft and the big winners in your mind?
Yeah, I'll echo with what Dillon said. The product was as good as you could have expected. It was very entertaining. I think the ratings were as high as any draft in recent memory, obviously helped by the fact that there's no other sporting options and everybody was tuning in. But I thought the product was really good. The NFL continues to be the best league in this country, and it's 365 days a year. And they so far haven't let coronavirus slow them down with the schedule coming out a few days ago. But my one sort of you mentioned like the MTV Cribs. Did you guys see the video behind the scenes of Roger Goodell's full basement?
No,
the dude looks like he's like living in like some like suburban regular person's home. He makes $40 million a year, and his basement is like this wood paneled, carpeted, like You think it'd be like a pretty cool man cave with like memorabilia and like TVs everywhere, but there's like 2 TVs and like an old recliner. And I was like, how is this where this guy lives? And he's telling us the draft picks from this shabby little basement with like folding card tables with a printer on top of it. It was pretty.
Just for him to remember where it's for him to remember his roots.
It was vintage.
Yeah, but it was that was kind of funny. But no, I agree. It was really cool and certainly refreshing to have sports again for the first few minutes until the frustration of the Eagles' actual pick set in. But yeah, I think the Cowboys have always had, or have pretty consistently had good drafts under Jerry Jones, and this was no different. I suspect we'll talk about CeeDee Lamb later because that was pretty heartbreaking for Eagles fans. But even getting the cornerback Diggs in the second round, it's good value, helps their secondary, potentially replaces Byron Jones if that pick hits. They added pass rushers later in the draft. So I just like they continue to let the board fall to them like they have in the past few years, and scary for the rest of the NFC for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting with the Cowboys. They never really seem to draft for need. They draft just kind of what, like you said, what falls to them, because clearly they don't need offensive help. That offense should be dynamic next year. And hey, if you want to add a prolific wide receiver to that core, why the hell not? But I was surprised to see that they didn't go defense. I think there is a lot of, the picks are really there to just screw the Eagles. I know Jerry Jones would love to see that happen. But, I think as much as they go with what picks, we'll see if this actually shows success. Because as we know, they are, with them, the Redskins are the least productive NFC East team in the last 2 decades. So when it comes to playoff wins and significant wins. So let's see if they can actually get over the hump and actually win something. So that's what I'm waiting to see. I'll echo what you guys said. I think the draft was great. I loved seeing everything in virtual wise. It's also a great, I think, blueprint on how other sports leagues should do it, how it is possible to hold these events via Zoom, via all these different locations, and get everyone involved. So kudos to the NFL for really knocking that one out of the park. It was incredible. But I need to now go to question 2, because Carlo hit it right in the middle there about how frustrating the Eagles draft was. So the Philadelphia Eagles decided to really waste no time in creating a controversy that the media at Philadelphia could eat up and just continue to talk about every fucking day. So they first take Jalen Reagor in the first round over the kind of sure, safe pick that was Justin Jefferson, picking speed over size, and also speed over productions, considering Justin Jefferson was the most productive wide receiver last year in college football. And then in the second round, they even amplified that controversy a little more with picking a quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who some in the Wentz hating bandwagon group, the people that just don't think Wentz is a franchise quarterback, it just adding fuel to their fire to continue to say, well, here's the now successor to Wentz, and also the front office of the Eagles do not have confidence in him. So we'll start with you, Carlo. My question after all that, and really just the stupidity, in my opinion, by the front office, of those 2 picks, Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson and then Jalen Hurts in the second round, who do you think was more outrageous or egregious of a drafting error, and really why?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually okay with the Reagor pick now that some distance has passed. I think like night of seeing CeeDee Lamb go 5 spots in front, where you felt like the Eagles could have moved up with the Atlanta Falcons at 16 and grabbed him. That was the guy I wanted. That was the guy I thought that Howie Roseman wanted. It didn't happen. We'll never know what the price the Falcons were asking for was. We'll never know if they, had an opportunity to do that. But that whole night was just soured by the fact that you could have had CeeDee Lamb, it felt like, but you're going to have to face him twice a year as a Cowboy for the next 2 years. So that sucked. And that bittered sort of the Reagor pick for me. But I don't have a problem with them going Reagor over Jefferson. You can debate whether they could have traded back 5 spots and Reagor might have still been there. I don't have a problem. They clearly said at the end of the season last year that they wanted to get faster on the outside.
Right.
And Reagor gives them that. His on-field speed was 21 miles an hour, which is the second fastest behind Ruggs at 22 miles an hour out of this draft class. He ran a slow 40 for him. He was the fifth fastest 40. But they wanted speed. They didn't need a bigger slot guy. I think Justin Jefferson was going to have a really good career with the Vikings. It wasn't what they were looking for. And this draft, I think, was all about getting the flavor that you wanted, the type of wide receiver that you wanted. And I don't have a problem if they sort of had Rager as their top speed guy after Ruggs was off the board at pick 11. They went after speed later in the draft too by trading for Goodwin and drafting John Hightower, Quez Watkins, guys who will have to work hard to get onto the team, but are 4.3 40 guys. And that's how they chose to build it. And I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, agreed. And the thing is, as we also saw, is apparently Rager at his pro day did run a 4.22, which would put him as the fastest 40 time for all the wide receivers. Again, that's his pro day, virtual, not at combine. So you have to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. But still, he clearly has.
I'll send you the video of my 40.
That's what I mean. It's same. Like when they were showing the video of it, I kept going like, I can't really tell when that guy is actually clicking the button or not. Like, I mean, are we sure about this? But anyway, the Eagles were confident enough that he had the speed.
He's very, very fast and a deep threat, and has a good vertical too to go up and get balls.
Oh yeah, 42-inch vertical. I mean, the guy at 5'11". I mean, we've seen that the new style of trying to get a Tyreek Hill, someone that can take the top of the defense, is important for offenses. So then, obviously, you're going with Hurts as the more outrageous pick. Dillon, your thoughts on the two? Which one did you think the Eagles kind of blew on that one?
So, personally, I don't like to judge teams' preference between players within a position.
Right.
Because we're not all. They have the evaluators out there. They know what they're trying to do. They have a plan, and if their plan doesn't align with the mainstream plan or the most commonly thought out plan amongst the media, then often teams get bashed, and so that I think it's unfair because there maybe there's a talent difference between Jefferson and Rager, but clearly the Eagles thought Rager was the guy that fit their scheme best. Mm-hmm. My biggest issue with Rager is that what has been a problem amongst Eagles receivers the past 5 years, and why the Eagles fan base notoriously despises Nelson Aguilar, is because while he's an extremely talented player, he drops the ball. He doesn't have good hands. And that's why, while Rager has great on-field speed and might really pan out, maybe he'll be the next Deshaun Jackson, he ranked 32 college receivers. He ranked 30th in terms of the top 32 receivers in college in terms of pass yards. He ranked 30th in drop rate.
Right,
he dropped
but Dillon,
10% of his targeted passes. I just think if you're an Eagles fan,
but
that's
real quick,
weakness.
Yeah,
for you.
I will let you finish, Dillon. Hold on, I'll let you finish. But if you did look at the stats on that too, it was 70%. It was of the 40% of the passes that were thrown to him were deemed uncatchable, and he did catch 70% of those. So while he may have a tendency, like we saw the completion percentage was low, it was shown, and this is why I started being like, okay, maybe after, because I was concerned by that number too. He did seem to have the ability to make difficult catches. So we'll see, but continue on your point there.
But that comes with talent. The guy has the traits to be able to physically reach that ball and to maybe make a spectacular catch. But I think just the concentration drops are what that's what Nelson Aguilar's issue. I'm sure if you look at Aguilar's tape, I'm sure he had some great catches. And I wouldn't argue that. Maybe I'm sure Rager has better hands than Aguilar does. But it is a weakness that Eagles have seen amongst their receivers that I think was kind of interesting to see them take a player that has a similar weakness to what they've seen in past years. But I think the reason that I would say, and I think that the worst pick was the first round pick than Hurts. And the reason I think that is because the Eagles, I'm baking in the fact that I think the Eagles should have traded up to make that big splash and to get that really good value wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb, who was falling. And maybe that was not on the table. Maybe the Falcons, for some reason, were not willing to. I mean, they took the cornerback that I think that they probably could have traded down 5 spots and got as well. So, I'm surprised that they were not able to come to an agreement. But it seems like the Eagles took a player who they could have maybe got another, similar talent in the second round and taken another position in the first round or, trade back. I just think that the value they got in Rager, it just didn't seem like they navigated the first round as well as they could have.
Yeah, and I think that's been the historical thing with the Eagles is the biggest criticism. Because I agree. I think, if you had dropped back and even got like a Mims or, I forget the guy from Colorado, I can never pronounce his name, but Lavishka. I think he went early second round, right? So I think you could have dropped back a few spots to even have him available, and he was a great speedster too. For whatever reason, the Eagles front office fell in love with Rager. So I'm hoping it pans out. But, the Eagles have not had the greatest success drafting the wide receiver position. So besides the Andy Reid era. So a little concerned, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to say personally, I'll jump in on this one. I'm starting to warm up to Rager. I think my biggest concern is Deshaun Jackson is going to be the weapon that we want for speed, and I can't rely on him. I think even when we picked him up last year, my biggest concern was his injuries. He can't last a whole season. There's always something that he tweaks because of just getting older and the speed that he runs with and the kind of intensity. It causes injuries. So for me, obviously, the pick of Jalen Hurts in the second round was the worst pick. And this leads into my next question, because my biggest concern, right, with drafting that quarterback in the second round is that there are several layers to it, right? One is the big media controversy. Right now, every single Eagles player cannot take an interview without someone asking, is Wentz upset with the pick with Hurts? Was Wentz informed about the pick with Hurts? How is Wentz going to do with this guy behind him? All this stuff. And the players have to, dance on a fine line where they can't say anything to hurt Wentz's feelings because, that's the presumptive starter. And they don't want to say anything to hurt the front office because, well, they're trying to keep a job. So they're being put into a bad situation, and it's just going to continue to bleed into the offseason and the regular season. The second one for me is Wentz's confidence in the front office. Does he believe these people actually have his back and are there to support him, which is important for a franchise quarterback to have that feeling of security. And then the third point for me is obviously the locker room and the fans are going to be divided. Some are going to, the second Wentz starts messing up, they're going to instantly go to Hurts and say, this guy needs to get in now. And the locker room could also become continuously divided if there's still people that are anti-Wentz in that locker room. So those how I see the three biggest issues by taking this pick for the team. So I guess my question to you is, what do you believe is then the biggest concern for you? Those are my three. If you share the same, that's fine. You're curious. But what are your biggest concerns? The Eagles making a pick like that. And can you also say there are no concerns? If you like the pick, maybe there aren't any concerns. But to me, that's where I'm at. So what are your concerns / non-concerns with bringing in a backup quarterback that early in the second round? And we are going, so Dillon, sorry, all right, I also got to be a good moderator and do this. But, so we're going to go to Dillon. You get to start this one now.
Sure. So I think, and I'll let Carlo, make his own point, but I think just based on the preliminary discussions that we've had that I'm going to get pinned to like the pro taking Jalen Hurts side of this argument that
we need someone.
I was out there being like, oh, the Eagles got to take Jalen Hurts, and he slips to them in the second. I never thought they were going to take it. I was as shocked as anybody else. And I wouldn't have done it if I was the Eagles, but I can rationalize it. And I think that's where we the three of us might differ. And that's because I think that so I guess let's preface this with what is the true value, the impact value of a second round pick. I mean, it's not a first round pick. You're not surely going to get production in your first year of a second round player. I mean, last year the Eagles took a wide receiver, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, in the second round. He had, given all the injuries the Eagles had, he had all the opportunity in the world to step in and have a valuable role for the team, and he did not. So, preface this argument of saying, okay, maybe it wasn't the worst idea in the world to take a quarterback, in the sense that, not all second round picks are sure thing impact players in their first year. So when you look at the Eagles' track record, if any team in football says how much value, is there in a backup quarterback, if any team in football is going to think that there's a lot of value in backup quarterbacks, why wouldn't it be the Eagles, who saw Nick Foles lead them to a title run in 2017, who saw Nick Foles win them a playoff game in Chicago the next year? So, given Carson Wentz's pretty thorough track record, and I'll keep in mind, Carson Wentz did not finish last year's playoff game either with a concussion. Obviously, that wasn't his fault. It was a dirty hit that caused that concussion. But he's had a back fracture, ACL tear, LCL tear, chest rib fracture, hand fracture, now concussion. I don't see why it's crazy to invest in the most important position in any sport. Why is it crazy to take a second round pick if you're in love with the guy? Take a guy that you think is a valuable backup.
Well, that like again, I understand that point. I understand that Carson Wentz has been injured. I do believe he is more durable than a lot of people give him credit for. He's obviously in the spotlight because of the big injuries in certain key moments. But that, I think my biggest thing, I understand your point with that the second round value. Is there going to be value in it? But I want someone that can make an impact, and I'm concerned that Hurts is not going to be able to start making an impact at all soon. It maybe I'm wrong, and again, this is where I always preface it. I could be completely wrong, and if somehow Wentz gets injured and Hurts lights it on fire, I'm obviously going to want to win. But I just have the idea that I feel like we could have gotten better value in that second round in another position or trade back. And I think Carlo, you share certain sentiments like that as well. So what were your concerns by making this pick in the second round?
Yeah, I mean, just like, yes, Eagles fans understand that the backup quarterback position is very, very important. Carson Wentz is great, in my opinion. He has been hurt. You need to have a good backup plan. Jalen Hurts right now is a third-string quarterback on this football team. That's who you drafted at pick 53. Let's look at all of the backup quarterbacks that were signed in free agency this year. Marcus Mariota to the Raiders, Case Keenum to the Browns, Jameis Winston to the Saints, Andy Dalton to the Cowboys, Brian Hoyer to the Patriots, Mike Glennon to the Jaguars, Josh McCown is still out there. All of those guys, and I'm sure I'm missing some, I trust, and I think most people would say are ready to be backups and potentially win you a game more than Project Jalen Hurts picked in the second round this year and maybe even next year. I don't know that Jalen Hurts projects to be a starter in this league in the next 2 years. Maybe he's good enough to be a backup quarterback at the end of this year or next year. I think he's number 3 on the depth chart right now. This is not a guy who's coming out. This is not a guy who's coming out as like, the next big star. He dropped to the second round for a reason. He was the 5th quarterback taken. He's a developmental quarterback. And for a team that thinks that they can win now, it's just a mismanagement of the 53rd best player potentially in this draft.
Capital.
When you could have helped your team now, as opposed to maybe in 3 years if the guy you invested $100 million in breaks down.
Yeah. So Dillon, what are your thoughts?
This seems like a disingenuous argument because I didn't hear any of this anger last year when the Eagles drafted a backup tackle in the first round. So, I mean, it's not an exciting pick because it's a low ceiling pick. You're drafting a player.
Jason Peters is 38 years old, Dillon,
and more injury prone than even Wentz.
But it's a first round pick, so you even want more impact in your first year from that player. And yes, he's going to step in this year, but you're talking about a round later. The second round pick is supposed to be as valuable. And yes, this year clearly this is, if you're thinking, okay, this is the last year of the NFL, that's it. Then why would you take Jalen Hurts? Clearly, Andy Dalton's a better option. The Eagles have the money to sign a better backup, but clearly the Eagles are projecting wanting to have a feasible long-term option, perhaps if Carson Wentz has persisting in durability issues, which he has shown to have. So it's not a crazy hedge for the Eagles front office to make because this isn't a 3-year projection. This might be a 10-year projection. So it's a second-round pick. They see a lot of potential. They obviously love him on tape for whatever reason, whatever scheme, Doug Peterson and how he think they can put him in. But it's a long-term projection. So when you're trying to justify it for 2020, it doesn't make any sense. When you're trying to justify it for the next 10 years, that's when you're saying, okay, maybe this actually does make more sense.
So Dillon, then I'm going to ask you this question because I think this is an interesting one that needs to be asked. Do you think Jalen Hurts is NFL ready right now?
No, but I agree.
I think it's a lot of people bringing it up that they think Hurts, like I said, I've been on Instagram, I've talked to, I've had Cowboys fans comment they think Hurts is going to take, Carson Wentz's job. That they believe Hurts is, he's a quote unquote winner. So that's my question to you because you obviously see some value in this pick. Do you think he can really fit into an NFL role now, or how long down the road do you think he can be actually playing in the NFL?
It's hard. I'm not an evaluator, so it's hard for me to tell you when I think Jalen Hurts will be able to step on the field and be a productive player. I would say that if Jalen Hurts came on the field this year, Carlo's probably right. He probably would be as a third stringer. I mean, I would be surprised if early in the year, especially that if Wentz went down, that Jalen Hurts would be ready to step right in. But I mean, I with no assurity can tell you that he would not be the guy, and I definitely can't tell you that in Week 12. If Carson Wentz had another concussion and was out for a few weeks or, whatever injury, I think that it's very likely that Jalen Hurts would be the quarterback to step in. And his development timeline is really not going to be what decides if this was a good pick or not. What decides if this is a good pick is if he does end up developing. And in 4 years of Carson Wentz never misses a game, I don't think the Eagles fans are going to be looking back and say, oh man, why did we take a quarterback in the second round? Carson Wentz was healthy. They're going to be saying, great, Carson Wentz hasn't missed any more games. We potentially were wrong about thinking that he wasn't as durable as he apparently is. And now maybe we have a trade chip. Maybe we have like a Sam Bradford, who the Eagles somehow traded for a first-round pick, and he wasn't even a young project. He was an older quarterback. So yeah. I think that there is potential value there, and it's a good hedge for the Eagles to make if they really do believe in Jalen Hurts as a long-term projector.
Right. Well, then, so I'm going to go, though, because I see Carlo shaking his head. So, Carlo, what are you thinking over there?
Yeah, the difference is that Sam Bradford was a first overall pick who had won football games in the NFL, and they fleeced the Vikings by getting a first and a fourth in that trade for sure. But like the ceiling here for this pick is like a Garoppolo and they think the Patriots got a second round pick for Garoppolo after he sat on the bench for 4 years. But like the odds that Jalen Hurts is a Garoppolo level backup that shows that he can be a starter and worth a huge contract is like a 5% or less proposition, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Sure, maybe they get lucky. You got to trust your evaluators. But we're talking about a pick that could turn into maybe returning a second round pick or by some miracle a first in 4 years. The Eagles aren't going to get rid of Carson Wentz, even if secretly they don't like him. Mm-hmm. I looked up his dead cap hit. Next season, it would be a $60 million dead cap hit, $25 million in 2022. If he's this injury-prone quarterback, what are you going to get for him on the trade market on that contract?
Especially that contract, yeah.
It boggles my mind when you could have taken a Denzel Mims or a piece for the defense or someone else. It's not a sure thing, but neither is Jalen Hurts. I would have liked to see somebody whose ceiling is coming in and contributing this year. And potentially next year when you're in this, title window, we think, and that's not Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
And why is that window closing? I mean, couldn't that window be open for, if the Eagles believe they can build a successful product for 5-10 years? I mean, they can continue to build for the future.
But Dillon, the thing is, the window we're talking about is, as you've pointed out too, is the way the contracts are set up, right? At a certain point, because now we've already paid Carson Wentz. Ertz is, we gotta make Ertz happy. There's a lot of spots on defense. I agree with you that the reason the window's closing is because of the core we have now that we believe is championship ready. You need to get in cheap talent on the draft to establish and help that team go the extra mile. And that's why I'm on the boat with Carlo, where I thought a wide receiver. And my other argument too with this, and this is why I don't get the Jalen Hurts fans in general, because there has been so much support for him coming in and thinking the talent. But through the games I watch, I get it. He threw a lot of yards. He was number one in the Big 12 as a quarterback in almost all the major categories. But the Big 12 doesn't intimidate me when it comes to defense. And there's a lot of deep passes, a lot of broken coverages that he took advantage of to get the yardage. And we saw, and again, the people do this quote unquote winner thing. He didn't win anything. He lost the championship his freshman year. He got benched his second season for Tua to come in. His third season, he's just waiting around because Tua is being the star and had one game they played well in. And then when he goes to Oklahoma, he gets absolutely routed by LSU in the playoffs. So I get it, it's a team game and everything like that. But when people say that this guy can be ready to go in the NFL, I just don't see it yet, because I think he is, as you both have said, a long-term project. And that's what concerns me, is that there won't be impact within the next 2 years on this Eagle team that needs more talent.
I think that a lot of Eagles haters are going to jump on the bandwagon of, Wentz is done. The Eagles want to get rid of Wentz, but they just paid him a huge contract. They obviously are committed to him for at least 3 more years. And I don't think that this is an either or situation. I think the Eagles would be so silly if they said, oh, we're going to go and replace Carson Wentz now.
Wait,
we have
sorry,
Jalen Hurts.
Dillon, hold on, wait. Before we go for this, because this is obviously the next question. So I'll let you answer this, the next one, because I think this is important. So the Wentz haters, people that do not believe in Wentz, that believe he's not a franchise quarterback, whether it's members of the Fulzian Society, whether it's Cowboys haters, whether it's just in general people that only watch a few games of Wentz a year and see the injuries and so on. Do you believe that Carson Wentz at this time should be worried about his job security with a quarterback like this behind him? And so, Dillon, you were getting into it, so I'll stick with you to answer that and finish your thought on whether or not his security is in jeopardy with this pick.
Well, I love this question because I love that Eagles fans have to think about if their beloved
It's the
Carson
end of the
Wentz
world.
is going to get benched. I think it's hilarious as a question. But I think it's a silly question. And I obviously agree with you guys on this, that Carson Wentz is clearly the better quarterback right now and probably will be next year and the year after that. But I think what Carson Wentz has proven is that he is the kind of quarterback that is talented, can win you games, and can't be the only quarterback on your roster. Carson Wentz cannot be the only quarterback on your roster that is able to win you games because he is likely to miss games at some point in the season. Not because I think he's made of glass. I think that as time progresses, if he continues to stack up injuries, those will be at higher risk of re-injury, especially when it comes to key injury points like a knee injury, which he's already had one of. But just the way he plays, I think he's an aggressive player, and I appreciate the way he plays. He's a true football player, but he often puts himself in dangerous situations to get an extra couple of yards for his teammates, which I think is admirable. But there's a reason that Eli Manning didn't miss any games throughout his career. It's because he didn't go and take those hits. It's not that Eli Manning
also looked
is made
very
of a
silly
different
running.
Well, he also looked pretty silly.
Yeah, he was also slow.
Exactly. He couldn't get 2 yards before the whole defense actually got to him. Well, all right. So I hear you. Understood. Injury prone, everything. Carlo, security. Is there a chance that Hurts is competing for the starting quarterback position?
I don't think from an X and O's point of view he's a threat to Wentz this year or next. And like I said, I think he is behind Sudfeld right now on the depth chart. But I can just tell you the way that Eagles fans are and Eagles, media is. I was listening to the radio yesterday and they were going through doing the W's, the W's and exactly like the W's and L's of like the season. And they were like doing like, okay, best case scenario, they win these games and they win 11 games or whatever. Worst case scenario, like they're doing all these hypotheticals. Like what if the Eagles start 2-4? Is that when we start hearing the calls for Jalen Hurts? Or if they start 3-5, like it's already happening now. Yeah. Like we're in May, we don't even know if the football season is happening and we're already doing hypotheticals. Like the point of having a franchise quarterback is that you build around them and you give them the space in the depth chart and also just psychologically to have bad games. Carson Wentz has had bad games. He had a couple bad games in the middle of the season last year. I think about, the Patriots game, even though he probably would have thrown a game winner if Aguilar could catch.
The first Dallas game was brutal.
The Cowboys game, he had a bad game. He missed throws. Patrick Mahomes has bad games. Players have bad days, and you don't want a quarterback who just went through this whole Foles thing for the last 3 years to now be looking behind him at this college player, this player that had some success in college, who was drafted 53rd overall, and who people on the radio and in the newspapers are calling for being the starter. It's a disaster. It's honestly a disaster, and I'm like almost mad that I agreed to come on here to relive it with you guys because it's just making me mad all over again.
100%.
Should we watch the pick over again to see a little highlight?
No. I mean, but that's again, I think that I am upset about in the same way is that this is not a small market team. Okay, you can't make moves like this and not expect there to be ramifications in the media and in general with the fan base, because there's just too much talk and speculation all year about this team. If you do this somewhere, Arizona Cardinals, Jacksonville Jaguars, all the small market teams, it's a small debate, but on the national stage, it doesn't matter. In Philadelphia, you think Howie has to understand that by making this pick, you are creating just going to be constant questions all year. And the second the team gets any problems, it's going to come up again and again and again. That's what baffles me too, is more about understanding where you are and what you're doing with that pick. So I'm very nervous to listen to sports radio in Philadelphia during this season and completely. It's going to be insane.
I think that is like the best argument you could make to say this was a terrible pick. Like if this was a real like draft losing pick, I think the best argument is all the noise it inevitably creates, because not only are you drafting a quarterback when you seemingly have a franchise quarterback who has a durability issue, so you have the door open for people to ask questions, oh, maybe they just don't trust him to stay healthy. And that's something that you wouldn't ask about a quarterback like, Tom Brady, who hasn't had a real injury history. But I think that the Eagles did put Carson Wentz in a bit of a precarious situation, because you allow people to have a name brand now. Jalen Hurts, whether he was, successful in college or not, based on whatever standard you're going to use, he was the Alabama quarterback. He was the Oklahoma quarterback. He played in big games. He's a big name for a casual football fan. They're going to know who Jalen Hurts is just because they've seen him play before, in college. So I think that they have opened the door for those types of criticisms, of people who are really not real football minds calling for a new quarterback as soon as Carson Wentz inevitably has a bad game. And I think that's a disservice. But the question is, does that matter? Maybe the Eagles think it doesn't matter. Maybe they think the noise is what, weak franchises worry about, and we don't really care about the noise. Carson Wentz knows he's our guy, and that's not going to affect him. But maybe that's their.
Okay, real quick, I'm going to pivot to Carlo because he knows this. Hey, Carlo, what happened to McNabb when the media was on him all the time?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a forgiving sports city, and I'll say something. To Carson Wentz's credit, being the good Christian and the professional that he is, he said all the right things, and it's not like an eye roll, kind of like just giving the party line saying either, where it sounds like he's not being genuine. He sounds genuine when he says that he's excited to work with Jalen Hurts and he trusts the front office. He texted Jalen Hurts after the pick. He tweeted, "Welcome to Philadelphia. Let's get to work." So he's doing all the right things. And I don't actually worry about the locker room dynamic as much as I just do the fans and the reporters and all of the other distractions that this could potentially bring when there's plenty of other needs on this team that could have been addressed with players on the board at 53. And you could have gotten your backup quarterback elsewhere, or drafted 100%. A quarterback to develop that nobody would know about later in the draft if he's going to be your third stringer anyway.
I think the only worst media scenario that could have happened in the backup quarterback position is if the Eagles had brought back Nick Foles as the backup quarterback. That's the only way they could have been worse versus this drafting of a quarterback in the second round.
That would have been the media, but Nick Foles is I wouldn't see a big issue with that, right? I mean, Nick Foles was getting paid this year. He probably wants to have a chance.
I'm just saying, but I'm just saying, media wise, it'd been a fucking nightmare. So, all right. So we've been hitting all these Eagles, and I think we're going to get a little more, but I did want to throw in a Giants question. So, and we'll let Carlo go first. So, because, I don't want to let Dillon just go in and just start making everything sound rosy for the G-men. So, Carlo, first question to you. After seeing the Giants pick going with the offensive tackle start off, it was Thomas, right, Dillon?
Sure is. Get used to Thomas.
Yeah, I gotta do more research on him. I just sometimes don't give a shit. But so my question to Carlo: have the Giants? Do you believe, seeing our NFC East rival with their picks, what they're doing to try and shore up the offensive line? Do you believe that the Giants have improved at all, or are they going to be back in their usual position of picking top 5 in the draft next year?
I think both are possible at the same time. I think that they had a good draft. I think sometimes the best drafts are the boring drafts. Not a ton of sort of sexy, flashy names, but I think that they got really good value, especially with their second round pick with the safety out of Alabama, McKinney, who slid to them at the beginning of the second round. I like that pick for them. They're clearly investing in the offensive line. There were 4 tackles who probably deserved to be drafted in the top 15 this year. They had the first pick of those 4. I'm not going to pretend like I break down offensive line film and can tell you why Andrew Thomas didn't deserve to be the first one to go. They got the tackle that they wanted. Hopefully this makes up for the egregious Nate Solder contract, and we'll shore up that line for Daniel Jones, probably on the right side this year, and then moving over to the left side when they can get out of Solder's contract. They got other tackles and guards later in the draft. I think they had a solid draft. Yeah. We can get into this more. I don't know if this means that they're going to win 10 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they were picking in the top 10 again. But top 5, probably not. I think they're probably good enough to win 6 or 7 games.
Hey, three offensive linemen
I
in
think
the
they got
first 5 rounds. 3 offensive linemen first 5 rounds are clearly, looking to protect Daniel Jones. So I think that's exciting. Good stuff we're seeing there from the Giants. Yeah, that's mean. So Dillon, then we'll go to you, our resident New York analyst here. How did you feel in draft night, and were you ripping your hair out like Eagles fans? Was it much more comfortable?
It's hard. I mean, like, I thought Thomas was a fine pick. I mean, when you're picking 4th in the draft, you can't get a steal. How far can a guy fall if you're picking 4th overall? I think it would have been nice if the Giants were able to trade back. It just didn't seem like, that they had all, they didn't have those options on the table to make a trade back a few spots and acquire some capital and still get the guy they like. Before the draft, I had heard a lot of, Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs, who were late risers, honestly, and because of their combine performances. And there was a lot of also coaching speculation that tied those 2 players to the Giants. Joe Judge, who had coaching connections with Nick Saban in Alabama and then at Mississippi State. So those are the names that you heard, and it was a bit of a surprise to see Andrew Thomas come off the board. And I actually like that because it shows the Giants kept a lid on what their true intentions were. And we heard that maybe the Dolphins, which I have a hard time believing, but maybe the Dolphins wanted to trade up and jump ahead of the Giants for Thomas.
Could you have imagined
which seems crazy to me that they would have done that, but anyways, I think it was a good pick. He's the most NFL ready left tackle. At the beginning of last year, he was the highest rated left tackle. At the end of last year, he was the highest rated left tackle. So I think that putting someone who has experience starting on the blind side and just has the most track record, I think it was a savvy pick than going for the combine star.
Yeah.
And then obviously the second round, which was made the draft for me. I was so excited about this pick because I thought that with Dave Gettleman, he was going to go for like a Epineza type, just like a big guy on the line. And when he took McKinney, I was so excited because I think McKinney was extremely good value there. I mean, picking him in the second round, you can get a first round talent in the second round. So that's where the Giants really, had a guy fall to them.
You need that talent on that defense too. I think that was another weakness, obviously, in the Giants right now.
Needing a pass defense safety, a free safety like McKinney, which is great. And I saw some Malcolm Jenkins comps, so I think that maybe you guys can give us a little bit of a precursor of what we're looking for. So I'm excited about the McKinney pick.
Yeah, I would say, my opinion, I thought Giants, again, I think, Carlo, your sentiment is correct. Like, sometimes the best pick is not the sexiest pick. I mean, the Giants didn't need a quarterback. They didn't need a running back. They don't need really wide receiver help. So there's none of those offensive, explosive players looking at. I think, they did the right pick going with offensive line. So I'll give Giants a good a pass on that one. I think they did well. It was interesting to see that the NFC East teams were all kind of involved in some interesting picks or, the controversy or lack thereof. Obviously, Redskins going second overall with Chase Young. But I was glad to see them all involved. So I think what we'll do is something that I didn't prep with you guys, but I think we'll do before we go to our NFC East winner. Let's throw up a quick grade for each team and how they drafted. So we'll start with the Washington Redskins. How do we feel they did? Carlo, your grade for the Washington Redskins draft.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here, Chad. I think B+. I think Chase Young was an obvious
There's nothing
pick.
crazy they did.
They got. Yeah, no, I can't remember his name, but they got the playmaking wide receiver running back out of Memphis later in the draft. I think it was fine. I think Ron Rivera knows what he's doing. I think my grade, without having studied it too much, would be a B+.
That's what we want. First reaction, B+. So Dillon, your grade for the Redskins?
I give it a B.
Give it a B. Solid. They passed. They did good.
Yeah, I think they did well. I mean, in terms of the talent they got, I give it an A. I mean, I think Chase Young was an incredible pick, but it was a no-brainer pick. So in terms of the picks that they actually had to put some thought into, I thought Sadiq Charles was interesting. I guess Ron Rivera will have a control of the locker room, but he had a lot of off the field issues at LSU that caused him to fall. But I think that was an interesting pick for a franchise that kind of doesn't really have a lot of character right now, and with a young quarterback, I think that might have been a questionable pick. Took a running back, third round, Antonio Gibson out of Memphis. I mean, I wasn't obsessed with any of the picks after Chase Young, but just having Chase Young on your roster, makes it a successful draft.
That's right. And I think we'll go to the Cowboys then. I think we all kind of thought they did pretty well. So then, Dillon, your pick for Cowboys. What's your grade on that for their draft?
I got to give the Cowboys an A, unfortunately.
Oh man, I almost want to throw up. It just disgusting.
I mean, people were saying they get Diggs in the first round, and they ended up with Diggs and CeeDee Lamb. It doesn't really make sense. You look at the haul they got, how they got it with the selections they had. So
they cheated. That's all I can say. I don't know how. The
The
scums of
yacht.
the earth.
Something about the yacht.
I
so much vitriol there. Carlo, what's your grade for them?
Yeah, I'd give them an A too, but I'll just point out if there's any Cowboys fans listening, 2 playoff wins in the last 25 years. So let's relax before we count on them making a deep run. But
That's
very
what I'm
solid
arguing,
draft
man.
from the yacht, from Jerry Jones's yacht.
I know, exactly. By the way, for whatever reason, apparently Jerry Jones can't hold his own cell phone. I don't know what's that about, but apparently, I don't know if you guys, did you see that in the video? The woman was always holding his phone up for him to talk into it to the players.
I think that's a level of rich where you get to the point where you don't hold your own phone anymore. I'm not sure what the number is, something if 7 or 8 digits. But yeah.
I no longer
I'm
take
not
my
there
own phone
yet.
calls. All right, then we go. Giants, your grade. Dillon, what do you grade for the Giants?
Give my Giants an A-. I like the draft.
Wow. Okay.
Well,
Someone's a homer
I guess
over
you
here.
disagree. No, I think
I give him a B plus.
I think they did as well as they could have with what was handed to them. I don't think that they had an opportunity to trade down from 4. I think they got an amazing value in the second round, and then throughout the draft, I think they made the right picks. So if you want to go and tell me if I'm including Leonard Williams, and I'll move it down to a B because I think the Leonard Williams trade is miserable, and considering the centers available in the third round, where the Giants would have been able to get a quality center with the Leonard Williams pick, and I no explanation for it, but without considering that, I'll give my team an A-.
Carlo, what are we giving the Giants here? What do you feel?
I'll do the same as the Redskins, B plus. I think addressing the offensive line, not sexy, not splashy. I'm not going to pretend to know all of the day 2 and 3 guys that they got, but addressing that position potentially for depth for the future, very smart. I think that they probably might have done well to address the pass rush. Which I still don't know. Maybe Dillon can enlighten us about who's going to line up at defensive end.
Yeah, man. Who do you have for that?
For the Giants this year? But you can't address every hole in one draft, and I think it was a solid, boring but good draft for the Giants.
There you go. And then let's wrap it up with the. Sorry, Dillon. Did you have some thoughts on that with a defensive end rushing and how you're going to play defense?
Okay. So for defensive end, I think that they probably didn't have. I would be shocked if they had no defensive ends on their board. But I think it just was the kind of thing where the right guy didn't fall to them. It seems like they might get Marcus Golden back, who had double-digit sacks last year for a cheap deal. There's a bunch of edge rushers in the market right now, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of teams vying for them. So the Giants.
Davian Clowney's still out there, man.
We don't have enough money for him, but
by the way, he doesn't deserve that money. He is the most underperforming star.
Year, right?
He's complete. He had 1 sack going into maybe it was 2 sacks. Yeah, maybe it was 3 regular, but I remember it was 2 or 3 going into that playoff game, and then he sacked Josh McCown, which isn't saying much, but yeah, I'm not very impressed with him, but he's on the market. There's an opportunity.
If I wonder if the Eagles had a whole pass rusher, would Clowney be off the board?
The talks have been there.
His concussion on Wentz.
Apparently,
I think that takes you off the.
Apparently, Wentz in the media has already said that he is would welcome him to Philadelphia, and there's all. Carl, you've seen the same things, right?
Yeah, and not only would he? It sounds like from reports, and you never know what's sort of fake or smokes and mirrors, but. The Eagles are apparently in on Clowney if the money were right.
I heard that too.
They always want as much talent on the D line, and they believe that it's a rotation. And Derek Barnett has been hurt himself, and so I don't think that they would have a problem pairing him up with Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat and Barnett in that rotation. If the number is right, the Eagles have, I think, the 10th most cap space, so they could get a 1-year deal for 14 or 15 million, probably too much for his for the production that he's done the last couple of years. But you have the cap space. You get a comp pick if he signs a big contract coming off of them next year. I think that he's very much in play.
I think it'd be funny because the second he makes a dirty hit in a game, if he were an Eagle, the amount of how much hate we had on him, the second he would do it to another team, like, oh, are you kidding me? That was a clean hit. Come on. That was no problem. I know I don't.
So biased.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say I'm not. That's for damn sure. All right. Then we'll wrap it up with the grade pick for the Eagles. Since, I haven't given a pick so far, I give the Eagles a B-, in my opinion. B- close to C+, just because I think of the use of the second round pick. But Carlo, your pick on that or your grade?
Yeah, I was gonna say C plus. I actually thought that day 3 they had a really good
Right. Late
they had
seemed
a really
great.
good draft. They drafted a couple a guard and a tackle out of Auburn. I think both of those were really good values and could potentially be backups or starters, which is what you want in day 3 is that upside. And I like the trade for Goodwin. You know, he doesn't have to be a 1,200 yard receiver. If he can get you 500-600 yards and be a rotational guy, that was worth it to move back like 10 spots in the 6th round. And then hopefully they hit on one of these wide receivers. So day 3 was a good day. Day 2 was terrible, and day 1 was okay. So I'd say C plus overall.
Dillon, what is your grade then for the Eagles?
Yeah, I was gonna say C plus, but I think I'm gonna go B minus. I'm gonna go B minus.
So nice.
I love that backup quarterback.
Dillon loves Howie Roseman.
Dude, man, Dillon, that's I was expecting a little more support for that Hurts pick, but I am surprised to see how much love you're giving it. So interesting.
Like I said, I don't love the pick, but I could be convinced. If Howie had me in a room for 20 minutes, he could convince me to love it.
All right, and then finally we'll do, so now to wrap up the kind of show, last question. We've given the grades for draft pick. Now we look to the 2020 NFL season, which is supposed to start on time. We're going to have games. We know the opening. We've seen the schedule. Eagles start off against the Redskins. Giants are starting off against Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Monday Night Football, too.
Wow, so exciting, that one. I guess I'll ask this one for y'all. It could be. So we'll all quickly, I think we shall see who our pick is to win the NFC East. Dillon, who do you think comes out of the East on top overall in the 2020 season?
So I'm gonna answer 2 questions with your 1 question. So because I didn't get to say what I think the Giants are going to be doing this year. So obviously I don't project the Giants to win the NFC East this year. And I think that they are still a step behind the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think the Cowboys are the favorites for the NFC East this year. I think this offseason pushed them over the edge. They didn't lose too much talent, and they've added a bunch of ready pieces to contribute this year. So I think that they have to be the favorites, but I think it's pretty much neck and neck with the Eagles. I think with the draft reaction, everyone in Eagles Nation's obviously freaking out, and then it feels worse than it is to have a 2nd round pick go basically to waste for this year. I think that the Eagles have all the pieces necessary to win the division, but I think with what the Cowboys did this offseason, they have to have the edge. But for the Giants, I think the Giants are rebuilding still, and I think they can have a successful season without going 9-7, 10-6. I don't think that's what the bar has to be for having a successful season, because they still have a lot of money coming off the books next year. They're one of the youngest teams in the league. Daniel Jones is still progressing, and if he has a good year this year and they go 7-9, and he shows a lot of progress and some of the young players really step up, they have a lot of money going into free agency next year, and they can really make a push for 2021 to make noise in the playoffs. So I think the Giants should have some growth this year for success, but I don't see them making a real push for the NFC East until 2021.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're gonna all of a sudden come in with that debate saying Giants are gonna win the NFC East, I was about to put you on mute, but I'm glad that there was some rationality with that discussion there. All right, so then Carlo, who do you think comes out in the NFC East, and then I'll wrap up with my thoughts as well.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't think the Redskins or the Giants did enough to contend this year. But I do think it is between the Eagles and the Cowboys, and the division, as always, is going to come down to those 2 games, home and away, between those teams. Where I give the Eagles the edge is that they won the division last year without their top 3 corners, without at some point their top 4 or 5 wide receivers, with injuries to the defensive line, and they were able to win the division and beat the Cowboys when it mattered in December. Now I understand that the offense of the Cowboys is coming back, plus CD Lamb. But I would be worried about that defense if I were a Cowboys fan. I think that losing Byron Jones was big for them. They lost their sack leader in Robert Quinn from last season. I don't know about their pass rush. Obviously, Lawrence is great, had a down year last year. I don't know if the corner they drafted in the 2nd round projects to come in and be an impact starter right away. So I think the Eagles have the edge on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that something that people aren't talking enough about is that all three teams, other than the Eagles in the NFC East, have new coaches. And in a season where there's not going to be spring workouts, there's not really an opportunity to install the playbook. Who knows if there's even going to be a training camp? Who knows if the season starts on time? I think that is sort of like an underrated edge with the Eagles coming into the system with Wentz and Peterson in their fifth year. I think that could be an edge that pushes the Eagles to, yeah, exactly. Like they're not starting from scratch, and I think that they, I expect them to win the NFC. So I think it's going to be close with the Cowboys as it has been the last few years.
I agree with you in that. So here's my always thought when it comes to these, the division title winner stuff, that basically you're still king until someone dethrones you. So in my view, the Eagles still got this. I don't think they've taken any steps back. If anything, they've stepped forward. All right. The defense clearly has improved. We've gotten to a lot more talent in the cornerback position. I think Mills is going to fit. Actually, unfavorable opinion, I believe Mills is going to fit great at safety. I think that's going to be an awesome fit there. I think the offense is getting better. Hopefully, apparently, Wentz is talking about Alshon and his relationship is not lost. It can still be renewed. We'll see there. I think you now have speed. I'm excited for it. Again, the coaching element is huge. And on top of that, the Dak contract situation. Will Dak be always happy with his contract? Will that bleed into the season? Will he be, looking at offers and looking past this season until he gets his free agency contract the next year? All of that wrapped into it. I respect and understand the prowess of that Cowboys offense. It can be dynamic at times, but I don't know what it's going to look like under a new system. And I also think their defense is one of the weakest in the NFC East. So I unless they can score 35 to 50 points a game, I think that's going to be where, shit goes wrong, is when they start losing it on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm still going to pick the Eagles as the favorite, Cowboys as the close second, and then the Giants and Redskins will fight for scraps underneath. But, we'll see how it goes from there.
I just have one quick question for you, Chad. Did we confirm that Alshon is the locker room snitch?
I'm almost positive. Yeah, Carlo, that was confirmed.
It was confirmed by other reports. Like, yes, the working assumption is that it was Alshon, but nobody has come out and said like, yes, I heard from Alshon.
He's the only one that doesn't
secondhand. And he's not going to be ready to play week one anyway. Even if he's on this team, he'll probably start on the PUP list and maybe get his act together by November and maybe make an impact, but I'm not optimistic.
But Dillon, yes, you're right. Apparently, all signs point that Alshon is a snitch, and snitches do get stitches, and we'll see how that plays out into the regular season. But on that note, I want to thank you guys both for coming on to talk this draft with me. It's been an absolute honor and privilege for me and the ChadBurn Show. So really, thank you guys so much for joining. It's always fun.
Happy to be here, Chad.
Yeah, guys. No,
Stay safe. Go Birds.
That's what I mean. Go Birds as always, Dillon. I'm sure we'll talk to you guys throughout the season. We'll have more debates. Oh, look at that. He comes in. If you're not watching this right now, Dillon just brought out and flexed his Super Bowl shirt. Which, by the way, how long ago was that? There we go. Look at that. Oh,
I don't know which one you're talking about. It's hard to see. I have so many of these shirts now.
Oh my God! Of course, flexing.
An antique. He bought it at the vintage store.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, always living in the past. I love that those other teams do that.
It could be any of the four. There's so many of them to count. I go to the 80s store, the 90s store.
And at that point, Dillon was muted from the conversation. No, but seriously, guys, thank you so much. We're going to have plenty of debates coming through the regular season. And as we continue to talk about the Birds and Giants, how they're doing, and as well as our continued hatred for the other teams, the Cowboys and the Redskins. But on that note, to everyone listening in, thank you so much for joining us. We continue to try and produce great content for you with these kind of conversations, bringing guests on, talking draft, talking everything NFL. We know there's not a lot of sports happening right now, so we appreciate you listening in to listen to what we have to say for the little bit of stuff that we can talk about right now. We're going to continue to bring it on. If you ever want to talk to me, reach out, have questions for the show, or have questions for us to pose on other episodes, you can email me at chadburn.show@gmail.com. Again, that is chadburn.show@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at ChadBurn Show, or our YouTube channel, The ChadBurn Show. All those areas where you can see the content, see the updates, as well as know when we're going to be coming live again, and when we're going to be releasing new stuff, as well as fun segments like the Chad interviews and our new persona, the Chad. Always trying to create fun stuff for you, so make sure you subscribe and follow and keep up to date with us. But until next time, I just want to say thank you for joining us, and have a good evening and good night.